Mostly in this video, the U.S. Coast Guard rescues a sailboat crew with a broken forestay outside of Honolulu. At Slowboat Sailing, we feature the stories of the most interesting sailors in the world, like Jean-Luc Van den Heede, the winner of the 2018 Golden Globe race. Subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next video. Dateline, July 29, 2018. The U.S. Coast Guard Honolulu responds to a sailboat with a broken forestay. At 3:30 p.m., a 45-foot response boat meets the crew of a sailboat who had put out a distress call on VHF Channel 16. The boat's forestay had broken and they needed a tow into Ala Wai Harbor in Honolulu. The weather was mild with 15-mile-per-hour winds and 5-foot seas. No injuries were reported. Luckily, the crew was able to get into port before their mast fell down, thanks to the quick response of the brave men and women of the Coast Guard's 14th District, Honolulu. So, since I posted this video originally, I got a lot of comments from the followers on Facebook about they didn't think that the crew of the boat acted responsibly. And I'll tell you my take. I've covered a lot of these rescues, and I've also had experience sailing in U.S. waters. And my experience sailing in U.S. waters is that we always had Towboat U.S. if we had engine problems. And we called them a lot because early on we did have a lot of engine problems with our current boat, but also with our previous boat, that we were not as good with engine maintenance as we are now. And we just, whenever we would call Towboat U.S., about 50% of the time, they just wouldn't come out. They would call the Coast Guard. So, for instance, there was one time when we were in the fog. It was a foggy day, and Towboat U.S. didn't want to come out because it was too foggy. They thought it was too dangerous. So they called the Coast Guard. And, you know, we were at a marina that was right next to the Coast Guard station. I don't know what the situation in Honolulu is, Ala Wai versus the Coast Guard station, but it might be pretty close. So it may not be a big deal for them to tow them in. Now, obviously, what would be the best practice if you had a broken forestay? The minimum best practice would be to put up a halyard and cranking that halyard so it's kind of like a temporary forestay. Still a dangerous situation. You could be dismasted, but that would be what people would do. We don't know that they didn't do that. It's not clear from the pictures that they did, but they're kind of grainy pictures. I've looked at them a lot, and I don't know if they did that or not. The other thing is that we don't know what's going on with their engine. Why did they motor in? Maybe they had engine problems, maybe they didn't. I don't know. We don't know anything besides the Coast Guard press release, which is really bad. The Coast Guard press release said that their boat was dismasted. So we know the photos, we know the Coast Guard press release. They say the 38-foot boat was dismasted. That's obviously not the case from the photos. They weren't dismasted. Clearly they were having problems with their forestay because their Genoa was flopping around in a weird way. But I'm not even sure from those photos that they didn't put up a halyard by that time, but probably not. But they could have done it by a time not in the photos. So the other thing that we don't know is we don't know that they called a mayday. We know that they called a distress call from the press release, but we don't know if they called a mayday. If they called a pan, probably the Coast Guard would come out anyways, even though that you're not saying that you're in distress, you're just warning people. That would be a prudent thing to do. So I think that maybe if you've not sailed in the U.S., you may not be familiar with how proactive the Coast Guard is. right? That they will come out basically for anything. If you call your tow company, they will probably call the Coast Guard, even though you don't. And so I think it's a lot easier from the Coast Guard's perspective to rescue people that are not in super danger than it is to wait until they're really in problems. I think if you look at the pictures, it looks like the crew members who are in bathing suits are a little bit young, so maybe they're a little bit inexperienced. Maybe they're taking out Dad's boat, and they just didn't know what they were doing, and they needed a little bit of help. And possibly that's what's going on there. Maybe they had engine problems, maybe they didn't. Maybe they made a lot of bad decisions and asked for government help that they didn't need. But maybe not. We don't know. We don't know enough information. I typically, for one of these things, I have the boat name. I don't have the boat name, so I don't know how to contact anyone, and I don't know how to find out more about the boat. Coast Guard, as a general practice, tries to maintain the privacy of people that they rescue, so they will not put out their names. All right, so leave your comments down below. Tell me, what do you think they could have done better? Subscribe to Sailboat Sailing so you can see Coast Guard rescues like the rescue of a man in the freezing waters of Lake Superior.